There is a moment, quiet and unnoticed, that happens somewhere between the thought you just had and the thought you are about to have. And in that narrow, sacred gap, your entire life is being decided. Understand this. You are not drifting through your days the way you believe you are. You're not simply reacting to a world that happens to you. Something deeper is at work beneath the surface of your waking hours. Something so close to you that you have mistaken it for the air you breathe rather than the hand that shapes it. That something is your mind, and more precisely, it is the identity you have quietly agreed to wear. The invisible garment you put on each morning without ever consciously choosing it. Stitched together from old wounds, borrowed opinions, inherited fears, and forgotten declarations you once made about yourself in moments of pain. Today, that changes. Today we begin to look directly at the throne room of your own consciousness, and we ask the only question that has ever mattered. Who is sitting there, and did you actually choose them? Think about this for a moment. Every circumstance you now call your life, the relationships that drain you or nourish you, the money that flows freely or slips through your fingers, the body that feels vibrant or heavy, the opportunities that appear or vanish before you can reach them, every single one of these is not random. It is not the universe playing dice with your existence. It is the outer shadow of an inner substance. It is the visible echo of an invisible assumption. The ancient teachers understood this before science had language for it, and modern seekers are only now beginning to remember what was always true, that consciousness is the one and only reality, and everything you perceive with your five senses is simply consciousness pushed outward into form. You are not a victim of your world. You are the unseen architect of it, and you have been building all along, whether you realized it or not. The truth is, most people spend their entire lives decorating a house they never chose to build. They rearrange the furniture of their circumstances, a new job, a new relationship, a new city, a new routine, believing that changing the outer arrangement will finally bring them peace. But the house itself, the very structure, the walls and the foundation remain untouched, because the house was never built by circumstance. It was built by identity. It was built by the accumulated, repeated, silently rehearsed sense of I am that runs beneath every thought like an underground river, feeding everything that grows above it. If you want to understand why your life keeps repeating the same patterns despite your best efforts to change them, you must stop looking at the branches and start looking at the root. And the root, always, without exception, is the self-concept you carry. The quiet, often unconscious answer to the question, who am I really? Let that sink into your spirit. You have been answering that question every single day of your life, often without ever asking it out loud. You answered it when you looked in the mirror and flinched. You answered it when you accepted less than you desired, because some part of you whispered that you weren't worthy of more. You answered it when you apologized for taking up space, when you shrank your voice in rooms where you should have stood tall, when you told yourself, that's just how I am. As though your identity were a fixed sentence handed down by some external judge, rather than a living, breathing choice you renew moment by moment. Understand this, nothing about who you are is fixed. Nothing about your current self-concept is permanent. It only feels permanent because you have rehearsed it so many times that it has calcified into what feels like fact. But feeling like fact and being fact are two entirely different things, and the moment you recognize this distinction, the entire structure of your reality becomes negotiable again. There is a reason the ancient scriptures speak so insistently of a kingdom that is not somewhere out there in the sky waiting for you after death, but a kingdom within you, present, immediate, and available in this very breath. When it was written that the kingdom of God is within you, it was not offering comfort, it was offering instruction. It was pointing directly at the mechanism of creation itself, telling you plainly that the power to shape your experience does not exist in Rome, does not exist in the marketplace, does not exist in the opinions of other people, but exists in the one place you have access to every single moment of your existence. Your own imagination, your own inner world, your own consciousness. This is not metaphor. This is not poetry meant to inspire vague feelings of hope. This is architecture. This is the blueprint of how reality assembles itself around the assumptions you hold as true. Consider this. Imagination is not decoration for the mind. It is not the fanciful cousin of logic, useful only for daydreaming and childhood stories. Imagination is the creative power of God functioning in man. Whatever you can imagine vividly enough, whatever you can feel as though it were already true, begins immediately to press itself into the substance of your life, slowly at first, invisibly at first, the way a seed presses itself into soil long before any green shoot breaks the surface. You have been using this power your entire life. The question has never been whether you possess it, because you do, undeniably, unavoidably. The question has only ever been whether you are using it consciously, deliberately, on purpose, or whether you are handing the steering wheel over to fear, to memory, to other people's expectations, and calling the resulting crash just how life is. Feel this deeply. Somewhere inside you right now there is a version of yourself who already lives the life you long for. Not a fantasy, not wishful thinking, a living possibility fully formed, waiting only for you to inhabit it with enough conviction that it becomes indistinguishable from memory. This is what it means to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, not to hope for something distant, not to beg for something external, but to step right now in your imagination into the emotional reality of the person who already has what you seek. The peace they feel, the confidence in their posture, the quiet certainty in their voice, the way they walk into a room already at ease because they are no longer performing worthiness. They simply know it. That version of you is not far away. That version of you is not waiting at the end of some long, arduous road of self-improvement. That version of you is available the instant you choose internally to be them. You must realize that the outer world has no authority over you except the authority you unconsciously grant it through your repeated attention and belief. This is not a denial of hardship, and it is not a dismissal of real pain. Pain is real, circumstances are real in their immediate sensory experience, but reality in its deeper sense is not fixed, it is fluid, it is responsive, it is at every moment an outpicturing of the states you inhabit within. If you have been taught to believe that you must wait for the world to change before you can feel different, you have had it exactly backward, and no amount of external effort will ever compensate for that reversal. The world changes when you change first, on the inside, in the unseen chamber where all true change begins. This is why so many people work tirelessly at the level of effect, chasing new jobs, new relationships, new environments, and find that no matter how much the scenery shifts, the same emotional weather follows them, because they never change the one thing that was actually generating it, which is the assumption they carried about who they are. Let this settle within you. Your subconscious mind does not judge, does not negotiate, does not argue with you about what is realistic or unrealistic. It simply accepts what you impress upon it with feeling and repetition, and then it works tirelessly, faithfully, without rest, to make your outer world match that impression. This is both the most humbling and the most liberating truth you will ever encounter, because it means the very mechanism that has been recreating your struggles is the same mechanism, unchanged, that can be redirected to recreate your dreams. Nothing needs to be invented. Nothing needs to be added. You already possess the entire creative apparatus required to transform your life. What has been missing is not power. You have always had power. What has been missing is direction, awareness, and the courage to take responsibility for what you have been unconsciously creating all along. Notice what happens when you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And instead ask, what have I been assuming that would create this? The first question keeps you trapped in the position of victim, forever waiting for rescue from outside yourself. The second question restores you instantly to your rightful place as the one who assumes, the one who imagines, the one who creates. This shift alone, this single reorientation of inquiry, has the power to dismantle years of stagnation, because it moves your attention away from circumstance and back to the only place where change has ever actually originated, which is the inner conversation you have with yourself in the quiet, unwitnessed hours of your own mind. Imagine for a moment a person who has spent years believing themselves to be unlucky in love. Every relationship confirms it. Every disappointment adds another brick to the wall of evidence. From the outside, it looks like fate, like bad timing, like a string of unfortunate coincidences. But look closer, look beneath the surface, and you will find a self-concept that was quietly running the entire show. A belief formed perhaps in childhood, perhaps in an early heartbreak, that they are not truly lovable, or not truly safe in closeness, or not truly worthy of consistent devotion. That belief does not announce itself loudly. It does not walk around wearing a sign. It hides in small, seemingly logical decisions. The partner chosen because they felt familiar rather than because they felt nourishing. The walls raised the moment real intimacy approached. The sabotage disguised as self-protection. The relationships were never the problem. The relationships were simply the mirror, reflecting back with painful precision the inner assumption that had never been questioned, let alone changed. This is why surface-level effort so often fails to produce lasting transformation. You can change your dating profile, change your circle of friends, change your city, change your entire external strategy, and still find yourself standing in the same emotional room, because the room was never made of wood and stone. It was made of belief, and belief follows you wherever you go until you consciously decide to leave it behind. The good news, the truly liberating news, is that belief is not identity in some fixed, unchangeable sense. Belief is a habit of thought repeated until it feels like truth, and any habit, no matter how old, no matter how deeply grooved, can be interrupted and replaced by a new pattern deliberately chosen and deliberately rehearsed until it too feels like truth. Allow yourself to see this clearly. The you who has struggled, who has doubted, who has settled for less than your spirit truly desires, is not the real and final you. That version is simply a temporary assumption you have been living inside, much like a room you wandered into and forgot you could leave. You are not your past decisions. You are not your family's limitations. You are not the labels placed on you by teachers, by parents, by former partners, by a culture that profits from your self-doubt. You are not your failures, and you are not even your successes, because both are simply expressions, footprints in the snow left by the deeper, formless self that walks beneath all of it, the self that chooses, the self that imagines, the self that says, I am, and then becomes whatever follows those two words with enough conviction and feeling. This is the heart of it. This is the sacred center around which everything else revolves. I am. Two words. And yet within them lies the entire mechanism of creation. Whatever you attach to those two words, whatever you complete that sentence with in the quiet chambers of your own mind, becomes the command you are issuing to the deepest layer of your being. And that layer, faithful beyond comprehension, obedient beyond question, begins immediately to arrange your circumstances, your opportunities, your relationships, your very perception of reality to match what you have declared. I am tired. I am struggling, I am unlucky, I am not enough. Each of these spoken silently 1,000 times a day through mood and posture and unconscious self-talk is not a complaint, it is a prayer, and it is being answered with devastating accuracy. But here is the glory hidden inside this same law. I am worthy, I am capable, I am loved, I am guided. I am already becoming the version of myself I have longed to be. These too are prayers, and they are answered with the exact same devastating accuracy, because the law does not care about content. It only cares about conviction. It does not judge whether your assumption is currently supported by visible evidence. It simply takes what you feel to be true, and it builds a world to justify that feeling. This is why the wise have always taught that faith is not about believing in something despite the absence of proof. Faith is about assuming a state so completely, so persistently, that proof becomes inevitable. You must realize that the discomfort you feel when trying to assume a new identity, the resistance, the sense of pretending, the inner voice that says this isn't really true yet, is not evidence that the process is failing. It is simply evidence that you are in the middle of the transformation, standing at the exact threshold where old identity and new identity overlap, feeling the friction of both at once. Every single person who has ever changed their life at the level of identity has passed through this exact threshold, this exact uncomfortable middle, where the new self feels like a costume and the old self still feels like home. The difference between those who succeed in the transformation and those who abandon it is simply persistence. The willingness to keep wearing the costume, keep speaking the new I am, keep feeling the new state, until one day, without fanfare, without announcement, the costume becomes skin. Think about this for a moment. A child does not doubt their ability to eventually walk simply because they fall repeatedly in the early attempts. Something in them assumes the outcome before the outcome has arrived, and that assumption carries them through every fall until the falling stops and the walking begins. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, most people lose this uncomplicated relationship with assumption. They begin to require proof before belief, when the entire creative law runs in the opposite direction. Belief before evidence, conviction before proof. The child was closer to the truth than the adult who abandoned it in favor of so-called realism. Understand this. Realism, as most people define it, is simply an agreement to keep recreating the past. It is the decision to only believe in what has already been proven, which guarantees that nothing new can ever enter your experience, because the new, by definition, has never yet been proven. Every breakthrough in human history, every invention, every act of courage, every transformed life began as an assumption held by someone who refused to be governed by what was currently visible. This is not naivety. This is the highest form of spiritual maturity, because it requires the willingness to trust an unseen process over the loud, insistent testimony of the seen. Let this settle within you. Your five senses were never designed to show you truth in its fullness. They were designed to show you the current outpicturing of past assumptions, which is an entirely different thing. When you look at your bank account, your relationship status, your body, your career, and you call what you see the truth, you are making a subtle but catastrophic error, because what you are actually seeing is the truth of yesterday's consciousness, not the truth of what is possible, not the truth of what is available the instant you shift your inner state. The senses report the past disguised as the present. Only imagination, only the deliberate inner vision of what you desire has the power to introduce something genuinely new into the equation. This is why the practice of living in the end, assuming now the feeling of your wish already fulfilled, is not escapism, as the skeptical mind so often accuses it of being. It is the most practical, most powerful act available to you, because it aligns your inner state with the reality you wish to experience, and your inner state is the only variable you have ever truly controlled. You cannot control other people. You cannot control timing in the way your impatient mind demands. You cannot force circumstances to rearrange themselves through sheer willpower and struggle. But you can control, absolutely and completely, the state you choose to occupy within your own consciousness, and that state, faithfully sustained, becomes the seed from which every outer circumstance eventually grows. Consider this: you have likely spent years, perhaps decades, trying to change your life from the outside in, adjusting behavior, forcing discipline, gritting your teeth through circumstances that never quite matched the inner peace you were chasing. And you have likely found again and again that this approach produces only temporary results, because willpower is exhausting, and exhaustion eventually surrenders back to the old familiar identity. But there is another way, an older way, a way rooted not in force but in feeling, not in struggle but in assumption. This way asks you to stop trying to fix the outer world directly, and instead to enter in imagination the emotional experience of already being the person for whom the outer world has already arranged itself favorably. Not someday, not eventually, now in feeling, in this very moment, regardless of what the senses currently report. This may sound to the untrained mind like an invitation to delusion, but look closer and you will see it is the opposite. It is an invitation to align with the deepest law of creation, the law that has always governed reality, whether or not you were conscious of it. Everything you now call solid, everything you now call fact, was once nothing more than an assumption held firmly enough felt vividly enough, sustained persistently enough until it hardened into what you now call your life. You did not consciously choose most of these assumptions. They were absorbed from your environment, your family, your early wounds, your culture's fears. But the same law that allowed those unconscious assumptions to become your reality is available to you now, fully, completely, the instant you choose to use it deliberately. You are not starting from zero. You are not being asked to create ex nihilo out of nothing. You are simply being asked to redirect a power you have already been using your entire life, often against yourself, and to finally turn it toward the vision you actually want to inhabit. This redirection begins with a single, deceptively simple practice: deciding with full conviction who you choose to be, and then refusing, gently but firmly, to entertain evidence to the contrary. Not through denial of circumstance, but through a steady, disciplined return of attention again and again to the inner feeling of the fulfilled state, every time the old identity tries to reassert itself. Feel this deeply. This is not a one-time decision. It is not a single affirmation spoken once in a moment of inspiration and then forgotten by lunchtime. It is a practice, a discipline, a daily and sometimes hourly returning to the chosen state, the way a sculptor returns again and again to the same block of stone, each stroke seemingly small, seemingly insignificant on its own, but accumulating over time into a form that could never have emerged from a single strike. Your new identity is being sculpted the same way, not through one dramatic transformation, but through the quiet, repeated, faithful return to the assumption you have chosen, especially in the moments when the old evidence tries hardest to pull you back. Understand this: the old evidence will try to pull you back, and this is not a sign of failure. It is simply the nature of transition. The subconscious mind, having run on old patterns for years, sometimes decades, does not relinquish those patterns without some resistance, some friction, some final flickering attempt to maintain the familiar. This resistance often shows up disguised as doubt, as fatigue, as the temptation to check the results too early, to look for proof before the proof has had time to form. But you must realize that checking too early is like pulling a seed out of the ground every few hours to see if it has grown roots yet. The very act of checking disturbs the process it is trying to verify. Trust, sustained trust, undisturbed trust, is not passive. It is the most active, most creative posture available to consciousness, because it is the posture that allows the unseen work to complete itself without interference. Think about this for a moment. Every master, every sage, every figure throughout history who accomplished something that seemed impossible to those around them shared this single quality in common: an unreasonable, immovable conviction in an inner vision that had not yet appeared in the outer world. They were often mocked. They were often doubted, sometimes by the very people closest to them. But their inner assumption remained untouched by the opinions of others, because they understood, whether consciously or intuitively, that outer opinion has no creative power over your life except the power you grant it by allowing it to shake your inner conviction. This is one of the most liberating realizations available to you. Other people's disbelief in your vision is completely irrelevant to whether that vision comes to pass, as long as your own inner conviction remains steady. This is why the deeper spiritual traditions have always emphasized solitude, silence, and inner communion as essential practices, not as luxuries reserved for monks and mystics, but as practical necessities for anyone serious about transforming their life. It is in silence, away from the noise of other people's opinions and the constant stimulation of the outer world, that you most clearly hear your own assumptions, and it is in silence that you have the greatest opportunity to consciously choose new ones. Every day, even if only for a few minutes, withdraw your attention from the outer world and enter the inner chamber, the quiet room within your own consciousness, and there deliberately, lovingly, powerfully rehearse the state of the person you are becoming. Feel their confidence, hear their voice, see through their eyes. Let their sense of peace settle into your body as though it were already yours, because in truth it already is yours. It is simply waiting for your attention to claim it. Let that sink into your spirit. This inner chamber is not metaphorical. It is a literal function of your consciousness available to you at any moment, requiring no special equipment, no particular circumstance, no permission from anyone else. You can enter it while washing dishes. You can enter it in the final moments before sleep, when the analytical mind loosens its grip and the subconscious becomes most receptive to impression. You can enter it in the stillness of early morning, before the demands of the day have had the chance to pull your attention outward. Every entry into this chamber, every faithful rehearsal of the chosen state is a deposit into the account of your future reality. And though you may not see the balance grow immediately, it is growing silently, faithfully, the way roots grow beneath soil long before any visible sign appears above ground. You must realize that patience in this context is not passive waiting. It is active trust, and it is one of the most powerful spiritual disciplines available to you. The seed does not doubt itself into stagnation because the harvest has not yet appeared. It simply continues doing what seeds do, drawing nourishment, extending roots, preparing silently for the moment when growth becomes visible. You are asked to do the same, to continue feeding your chosen assumption with attention, with feeling, with repeated inner rehearsal, trusting the process even when, especially when, the outer world has not yet caught up to the inner decision you have made. Consider this. Divine timing is not a vague, comforting phrase meant to placate your impatience. It is a genuine principle rooted in the fact that transformation happens first at the level of consciousness and then must work its way outward through layers of circumstance and relationship far more complex than your conscious mind can perceive. What feels like delay is very often simply the necessary reorganization of your outer world to match your new inner state. Old relationships gently dissolving to make room for new ones aligned with who you are becoming. Old opportunities closing so that better ones can open. This takes time, not because the law is slow, but because your life is intricately woven with the lives of others, and the unfolding of your new reality often requires a coordination that only a wisdom far greater than your conscious mind could orchestrate. This is where surrender becomes essential, not surrender in the sense of giving up your vision, but surrender in the sense of releasing your grip on exactly how and when that vision must appear. You are asked to hold the feeling of the wish fulfilled with unwavering conviction, while simultaneously releasing your attachment to the specific mechanism by which it arrives. Your job was never to figure out how. Your job was only to decide what, and to feel the reality of that decision as though it were already accomplished. The how belongs to a wisdom that operates beyond the limitations of your conscious linear thinking, a wisdom that can arrange coincidences, orchestrate meetings, open doors you did not even know existed, all in service of the state you have faithfully assumed. Notice what happens when you release the how and simply trust the what. A subtle but profound relaxation moves through the body, the shoulders drop, the breath deepens. The constant, exhausting vigilance of trying to force life into submission begins to soften, replaced by a quiet, powerful confidence that the very universe, the very consciousness in which you live and move and have your being, is conspiring on your behalf because you have finally aligned your inner state with the outer reality you desire. This is not passivity. This is the deepest form of active creation, because it is creation at the level of cause rather than the exhausting, endless labor of trying to create at the level of effect. Feel this deeply. You were never meant to struggle your way into your desires through sheer force alone. You were meant to assume your way into them, to become, in inner reality, the person for whom those desires are natural, obvious extensions of who they already are. A wealthy person does not struggle to think wealthy thoughts. Wealthy thoughts are simply the output of their wealthy identity. A confident person does not force confidence through gritted teeth. Confidence flows from their settled sense of self. This is the secret hidden inside every transformation that has ever lasted. The change was never really about the external achievement. It was always about the identity shift that made the achievement inevitable, almost incidental. This is why chasing external achievements without first shifting identity so often leads to the strange, hollow experience of arriving at the goal and still feeling empty, still feeling like an imposter, still feeling unworthy, despite the evidence sitting right in front of you. The achievement was pursued from the old identity, and so the old identity remains confused and unsatisfied, standing amid success it does not truly believe belongs to it. True fulfillment, lasting transformation, requires the reversal of this order. Become first on the inside, and let the achievement follow as the natural, almost effortless expression of who you have already decided to be. You must realize that this is not a technique to be applied only when things go wrong. This is meant to become your ongoing relationship with life itself, a continuous, conscious participation in your own becoming. Every day offers you countless small opportunities to reinforce either your old identity or your new one. The way you speak to yourself when you make a mistake, the posture you hold when you walk into an uncertain situation. Each of these small moments is a vote cast for the self you are becoming. And the accumulation of these votes over days and weeks and months determines which identity ultimately wins the election of your life. Let this settle within you. You do not need to wait for a dramatic singular moment of transformation. Begin now, in this ordinary moment, with the ordinary thought you are having, the ordinary sentence you are about to speak. Extraordinary lives are built almost entirely out of ordinary moments infused with extraordinary conviction. The grandeur is not in the circumstance. The grandeur is in the consistency of the inner choice repeated so faithfully that it eventually becomes indistinguishable from your very nature. Think about this for a moment. If you were to fall asleep tonight and wake up tomorrow, having completely forgotten your old limitations, your old fears, your old story about who you are and what you deserve, if you were to wake up with only the quiet, settled knowledge that you are worthy, capable, guided, and already becoming everything you have longed to become, how would you move through your day differently? What would you say yes to that you have been saying no to out of fear? What would you finally release that you have been carrying long past its usefulness? What would your voice sound like, freed from the need to shrink itself for other people's comfort? Sit with this question not as a fantasy but as an instruction, because the truth is, nothing external is actually preventing you from making this choice right now, in this very moment, regardless of what tomorrow's circumstances have not yet caught up to. Imagine for a moment the relief of finally putting down an identity that was never really yours to begin with. The identity assembled from other people's fears, other people's limited beliefs about what was possible for someone like you, other people's projections of their own unlived lives onto your still forming sense of self. You did not choose most of what you currently believe about your limitations. It was handed to you, often with good intentions, by people who were themselves operating from their own unexamined assumptions. But you are not obligated to keep carrying what was handed to you. You are allowed at any